I'm a 34-year-old woman, and I've been married to Eric for 3 years. He's 36, works in software, and has a calm way of carrying himself that makes people trust him instantly. I met him through work. He's not flashy or loud, just steady, respectful, and always thinking of others. That's probably what drew me to him in the first place. But for my family, those traits never seemed to matter. My family's definition of family is very specific: bloodlines, shared holidays, and names that go back 3 generations. It's about who sat at the kids' table in 1999, who helped clean up after Grandma's 60th, and who played shortstop in the backyard every July. If you weren't there for those things, you're not really in, and Eric wasn't. He didn't grow up with us. He didn't know the nicknames. He didn't get the inside jokes. So from day one, they treated him like he was temporary. At family dinners, they'd set out place cards like it was a wedding reception. Every name was written in perfect calligraphy, except his. Sometimes there was a blank card. Sometimes someone would scribble one with a ballpoint pen just before we sat down. At first, I thought it was a harmless oversight, but it kept happening. When we took group photos, someone would always hand Eric the camera. No one asked him to get in the shot. At my niece's birthday, my brother stood up to introduce all the spouses by name, except Eric. His name wasn't forgotten, it was skipped. There was a beat of silence, then he moved on to cake. Eric never made a scene. He'd quietly stand back, smile politely, and whisper that it was fine, that maybe he just needed to give it time, that they'd warm up eventually. For years, I believed him, but last Christmas made it impossible to ignore anymore. My father handed out engraved cufflinks to both my brothers-in-law during dinner. Everyone clapped, said how classy they looked. Then he turned to Eric and passed him a tie. It still had the clearance sticker on it from the department store. The price tag was hanging off the side. Nobody said a word. Later that night, my mother brought out a velvet box. Inside was the family heirloom bracelet, the one she had always said would go to the next daughter-in-law. She gave it to my sister-in-law, who'd already received 1 year ago when she married my brother. When I asked about it quietly in the kitchen, my mother said, "It felt right. She's part of the family." My father walked in mid-conversation. He added, "Eric hasn't earned his place yet. It takes more than time to be considered family." They weren't angry when they said it. Just matter of fact, like it was common sense. What they didn't know was that Eric had overheard everything. He'd gone to the hallway to grab our coats and caught the entire conversation from behind the wall. He didn't come back in. We left without dessert. The car ride home was quiet. He didn't speak. He just looked out the window like he was trying to memorize the night sky. When we got home, he went straight to bed. No argument, no breakdown. That made it worse. I stayed up. I walked around the apartment picking up wrapping paper scraps, half-used ribbon, things we had planned for weeks to bring to that dinner. I looked at our wedding photo on the bookshelf, the one where my dad was standing stiff and awkward in the back row, barely smiling. I remembered how that photo almost didn't happen because my mother kept asking if we wanted a separate one, just the real family. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started typing. I titled the private document, "Show them." Not in anger, not for revenge, but to make it clear to myself that I wasn't going to shrink back into their small definitions anymore. I wasn't going to wait for a seat to be offered. I was going to build the table, one where Eric belonged before the meal even started. That document became my map, not of how to get back into their circle, but how to build our own, one that wouldn't require permission slips or blood tests to enter. I didn't know what all the steps would be yet, but I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to explain my husband to anyone ever again. And whatever came next, they weren't going to see it coming. A few weeks after Christmas, my cousin Melanie got engaged. She called me that weekend, excited, and asked if I'd help plan the wedding. I've always been close to her, so I said yes without thinking twice. We started a shared calendar, exchanged Pinterest boards, and even toured 2 venues together. It felt like a fresh start after everything that happened during the holidays. But 2 weeks into planning, I found out that Eric wouldn't be invited. The guest list was being kept small, and they were only allowing what they called recognized spouses. I didn't understand at first. Eric and I had been married for 3 years. We weren't dating. We weren't engaged. We were legally married. When I asked what recognized meant, Melanie said her parents were worried Eric wasn't really close to the family, and it might be awkward. That night, I sent her a short message thanking her for the invite but letting her know I was stepping down from helping. I didn't explain. She didn't ask for one. 3 hours later, my dad called. He started by asking why I was making a big deal out of nothing. Then he moved on to telling me how much Melanie looked up to me and how I was letting everyone down. I asked him a simple question: if Eric isn't welcome, am I? There was a pause, long enough that I checked my phone to see if the call had dropped. And then he said, "You're always welcome, but that doesn't extend to everyone you bring." I made it clear that I wouldn't be attending any future events where my husband was deliberately excluded. The call ended there. 2 days later, my mother sent a group message to the entire family, siblings, cousins, aunts, everyone. She wrote a long paragraph about how hurt she was, how I'd changed, and how I was letting my marriage cloud my loyalty. Her last line read, "Don't disown your blood for convenience. It never ends well." I left the message on read. No replies, no back and forth. That door didn't need to swing anymore. The week after that, Eric's mother had a health scare. She collapsed at her home, and the neighbors had to call an ambulance. We caught the first flight out and stayed with her while she recovered. It was a rough few days, multiple checkups, prescription refills, cooking meals she could digest. We didn't sleep much. Not one person from my side of the family reached out. They didn't ask if we were okay. No one checked if we'd landed safely. Nothing. My phone stayed silent the entire week. When we got back home, my sister hosted a baby shower. I wasn't invited. She made it public on social media though, so it wasn't hard to see the photos. I scrolled through them while unpacking our suitcase. There was something strange about one of the guests, a woman I hadn't seen in years, Eric's ex. She and my sister weren't even friends in the past. I knew that for a fact. But there she was, in one of the photos, chatting near the cake table like it was normal. like she belonged there more than Eric ever did. That was when it clicked. They weren't just ignoring him anymore. They were replacing him, one photo at a time. I didn't text my sister. I didn't confront anyone. I just closed the app and kept unpacking. That night, while sorting through our mail, I opened an envelope that turned out to be a wedding invitation from one of Eric's coworkers. It was a simple card, nothing fancy, but it got me thinking. I sat down at the kitchen table, took out the show them document I had started weeks ago, and added a new line. Post a vow renewal. Not for attention. It's not to spite anyone, but to make a statement. A quiet one. A clear one. I wanted to create a space that wasn't built on old rules, old roles, or old names. Just us, and the people who had shown up for us without hesitation. Over the next few days, I started sketching out the details in a notebook. It wouldn't be some big, flashy event. No long speeches or staged family photos. I wanted warmth. People who brought food without being asked. People who hugged Eric first when they saw us walk in. People who didn't need reminders that he was my husband, because they never forgot in the first place. I hadn't told Eric yet, but I knew this was the right step, not as a reaction to what we'd lost, but as a way to honor what we had and who chose to stand with us. That moment, sitting alone at the table with stacks of junk mail and empty suitcases around me, felt more like a beginning than an ending. And this time, we'd be writing the guest list ourselves. I spent the next 4 months planning the vow renewal in complete silence. No hints, no social media posts, no group messages. I wanted it to be ours from start to finish, clean of drama, untouched by obligation, and filled only with people who had never once made Eric earn his place. I used my year-end bonus and dipped into our savings. Not for something extravagant, just something thoughtful. A vineyard 2 hours from the city caught my eye while browsing venues. It had no connection to my family, no overlapping history, and no lingering shadows. The hills were green, the wine was decent, and the staff answered emails quickly. That was enough. The guest list wasn't long, but it was honest. Eric's sister and her kids. 2 of his cousins who had driven 10 hours just to attend our wedding years ago. My college roommate and her husband. A couple of Eric's coworkers from his old job who still checked in every few weeks. And 2 of my cousins, the only ones who had ever treated him like he belonged at the table. Everyone invited had passed one simple test. They never made Eric feel like an outsider. I designed the invitations myself. Cream cardstock, navy font, and across the top in bold, Chosen Family Celebration. I printed them on our home printer and sent them out in batches. When Eric saw the sample card on the kitchen counter, he picked it up and stared at it for a while. No questions. Just a look I hadn't seen in a long time. His sister called me 2 days later in tears. She said no one had ever formally invited her to anything like that. She offered to cook something, help with setup, anything we needed. I gave her a few simple tasks, nothing stressful. She ended up organizing the entire dessert table without being asked. Around the same time, I got a message from my aunt, my father's younger sister. Someone at her church had mentioned a wedding thing happening at a vineyard. She wanted to know why she wasn't invited. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her the guest list was reserved for those who had accepted me and my husband without conditions. She left the message on read. I didn't follow up. A few days before the ceremony, my phone rang while I was at the florist. It was my mother. I stepped outside to take the call. She asked if we were hosting some sort of event because she'd heard things. I told her yes, we were celebrating our marriage with the people who believed in it. She hung up. That was the last I heard from her. No follow-up calls. No emails. Nothing. On the day of the vow renewal, the weather was perfect. Warm, clear skies with a steady breeze, just enough to keep the air moving, but not enough to ruin anyone's hair. The venue had a white wooden arch wrapped in ivy. Eric stood beneath it in a navy suit, looking more grounded than I'd ever seen him. No tension in his shoulders. No second guessing in his posture. Guests started arriving around 3 p.m. Eric's cousin brought folding fans with our names printed on the handles. My old roommate brought a playlist on a flash drive and offered to handle the music. Someone else brought an extra cake just because they had time the night before and thought it might be useful. Right before we exchanged vows, Eric's father, who had quietly supported us from the sidelines for years, gave a short toast. He raised his glass, looked around the crowd, and called me his daughter. Then he thanked everyone for coming and said, "This is what family looks like when it's not based on blood, but on choice." No one clapped. They didn't need to. The silence felt full, like everyone there already knew. The vows were simple. Nothing we hadn't already lived through. Afterward, we ate, we danced, we sat on picnic blankets, we played cards. Eric's niece tried to steal cupcakes and ended up smearing frosting all over her dress. No one got upset. It didn't feel like we were making a point anymore. It just felt like peace. After the last guest left, we stayed behind to help clean up. The venue owner offered to let us take some leftover wine home. We packed it carefully in the trunk and drove back in near silence, both of us too tired to talk but too content to sleep. That night, I printed one of the photos from the ceremony, a shot of us standing under the arch, holding hands, with everyone behind us in the background smiling. I framed it and placed it on the wall across from our wedding photo. Side by side, the difference was obvious. One was the start of something we had hoped would grow. The other was proof of what we had built on our own. 2 days after the vow renewal, a message lit up the extended family group chat. My father had typed, "Some people forget where they come from the moment someone claps for them." The text sat there, followed by a series of heart, reacts, and thumbs up emojis from other relatives. A few minutes later, my brother added, "Putting on a show won't undo what you owe your family." I didn't respond. I forwarded the messages to Eric. He read them once, then tapped delete, and went back to cleaning the stovetop. Not a single word. That weekend, Melanie's bridal shower happened. I hadn't been invited, no surprise, but someone who attended messaged me later and said I was brought up in a toast. They said I had lost myself trying to prove a point and that some people let marriage erase who they are. I didn't try to correct the record. I let them keep their version of me. It cost me nothing. 1 week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was an invitation to a family reconciliation dinner, printed on thick cream paper, with just my name on the envelope. No +1. No mention of Eric. Eric saw it on the counter, picked it up, and handed it to me while folding a towel. Then he walked off to put away the laundry, like it was just another piece of junk mail. I called my parents that night to decline. My mother picked up. She told me I was being stubborn. She said no one hated Eric, they just missed the old version of me. The one who showed up to every event. The one who played the middle. The one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I told her the truth. The old me didn't speak up because I believed the disrespect was temporary. I thought it would pass. I thought it wasn't personal, but now I knew better. It had always been part of the structure, a silent agreement no one ever said out loud, that Eric would never truly belong. She didn't reply. The line went dead. I didn't bother calling back. 2 days later, my father's sister, the same aunt who had messaged me before the vow renewal, showed up at my job. She didn't call ahead. She just walked into the front lobby and asked the receptionist to page me. I came down thinking it was an emergency. Instead, she handed me a gift bag with a decorative candle and a handwritten note. Then she launched into a speech about how the family felt disrespected by the way we'd excluded them, how I was punishing everyone for having their own boundaries, how I was failing to separate marriage from blood loyalty. I asked her one question before walking her out. Would Eric be treated this way if he looked like us or had our last name? She didn't answer, just shifted in her shoes and blinked a few times. That night, I walked around our apartment, pulling down all the old family photos, framed ones from weddings, graduations, and holidays. I wrapped them in newspaper and placed them in a box labeled storage. Then I pulled out the photo from the vow renewal, the one with Eric standing in the center, surrounded by people who smiled like they meant it. I hung that photo where the old ones had been, not out of anger, just to make space. A few weeks later, my brother and his wife hosted a backyard barbecue. It wasn't a secret, photos were posted, comments poured in, and everyone from our side of the family was there. Everyone except us. No message, no explanation, no accidental oversight. That same evening, a friend of ours, someone who had been invited through another guest, sent me a photo from the barbecue. It was a wide shot of the grill setup. Above it hung a banner that read, "Real family sticks together." The text was printed in bold red letters, strung up between 2 trees like a mission statement. Eric saw the picture and gave a short, dry laugh. Not because it was funny, because it confirmed exactly what we expected. Later that weekend, we heard through our neighbor, who works part-time at a local catering company, that my parents had hosted a formal dinner party. It was for my dad's retiring coworker. Apparently it was a big night, rented tables, catered food, music, speeches. Our neighbor worked the event and recognized some faces from photos in our apartment. She mentioned a toast had been made about protecting family values and keeping tradition intact in a changing world. No one had invited us, not even out of politeness. That night, I opened my email and scrolled back through old family group threads. I started noticing patterns. Birthday party plans, vacation rentals, Christmas shopping lists, Eric's name was never mentioned. If someone needed a head count, it was always just me. Even when Eric's father passed away 2 years earlier, no one from my family had acknowledged it. No condolence text, no flowers, no call. I had brushed it off at the time, telling myself people get busy. But now I saw it clearly. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was intentional. I called my sister and asked one question. Had our parents ever made any real effort to get to know Eric when I wasn't in the room? She went quiet, then admitted that our father once told her Eric was just a phase and that I'd come to my senses eventually. She didn't defend it. I didn't press it. The call ended not long after. That weekend, we drove 5 hours to attend Eric's cousin's graduation party. It wasn't fancy. Just folding chairs in a backyard, aluminum trays of food, a cooler full of soda, and music coming from a Bluetooth speaker sitting on a patio table. Still, every person there came over to say hello. They asked about our jobs, remembered details from past conversations, and thanked us for making the drive. Someone even mentioned the cake I had brought to the vow renewal, remembered the exact flavor. Eric was pulled into group photos without hesitation. No one handed him the camera. On the drive home, somewhere along the highway, Eric looked out the window and said, "I didn't realize how fake my smile had become until I didn't have to wear it anymore." We drove in silence for a while after that. Then I told him the truth. I wasn't grieving what we'd lost anymore. I was just relieved. Relieved we had stopped pretending there was anything left to save. My birthday was coming up, and I could already feel it in the air, the guilt trip, dressed up as a celebration. It was the same every year. A text, a call, a last-minute invitation from someone acting like nothing ever happened. I wanted no part of it this time. I asked Eric if we could keep it small. Just his parents, his brother, and dinner at home. No reservations, no crowds, no surprises. He agreed right away and offered to handle the groceries. 3 days before my birthday, a courier came to the door with a gift basket. No one rang the bell. The box was just left at the doorstep, signed for with our neighbor's name. The tag read, "To our daughter, hope you remember where you came from." Inside were a few spa items, a box of cookies, and a candle with the same scent I used to burn in college, one I hadn't liked in years. Nothing in the basket mentioned Eric. His name wasn't on the tag. It was like he didn't exist. I put the basket on a shelf in the garage. Didn't throw it away. Didn't open anything. It just sat there behind a stack of old moving boxes. On my birthday, Eric's mother came over in the afternoon and cooked my favorite meal from scratch. No takeout. No shortcuts. She brought the ingredients in a paper bag and shooed me out of the kitchen while she worked. Eric's brother showed up just before dinner with a folded envelope in his hand, 2 concert tickets to a jazz show I'd once mentioned offhand 6 months earlier. After dinner, we cleared the table and played cards at the kitchen counter. We laughed until our faces hurt. No one asked about my family. No one made excuses for anyone who wasn't there. It was the most peaceful birthday I'd had in years. That night, while rinsing the dishes, my phone lit up. A message from a mutual friend popped up. She'd been invited to a surprise birthday dinner, booked at my favorite restaurant, private room, full guest list. My parents had put it together without telling me. They had expected me to show up on instinct. I didn't reply. I didn't show up. I didn't feel the need to explain myself again. That part of my life was already boxed and shelved with the gift basket. A few days later, one of my coworkers told me they ran into my uncle at the farmer's market. He recognized her from a photo I had on my desk and passed along a message, tell her that her father wants his daughter back. I asked her to respond simply, she never left. She just stopped showing up to places where her husband isn't seen. The following week, my company hosted a panel on workplace leadership, and I was one of the speakers. I didn't prepare a script. I just talked about loyalty, about standing beside the people you love when it's uncomfortable, said about what it costs to not fold. Afterward, several coworkers came up and said it didn't sound like a theory. I told them, that's because it wasn't. 2 months after my birthday, Eric and I made our decision. We were done bending ourselves to fit into spaces that never wanted us whole. We were leaving the state, starting fresh somewhere quieter, slower, and lighter. I applied for a lateral position at my company's branch office across the country. The interview was short, and the offer came quickly. Eric scheduled his own a few days later. It's a different company, same city. He got it. We said yes to both before anyone on my side of the family even knew we were considering a move. We didn't keep it secret out of fear. We just didn't owe them that chapter. Not anymore. On the day we packed our final box, Eric's mother came over with foil-wrapped meals for the road, sandwiches, fruit, bottled water, and cookies in a container marked for the long parts. Before she left, she handed me a small photo album. The cover said, "Where family truly starts, no speech." Just a soft smile and a hug goodbye. Before we pulled out of the driveway, I sent a short message to my youngest cousin, the only one who had never taken sides, never picked at Eric, never backed away from us. I told her we were relocating, thanked her for always being kind, and wished her well. She replied quickly, wished us luck, said she hoped the next chapter would be easier. That was enough. The drive took 2 days. We didn't rush. Stopped in small towns, ate at roadside diners, listened to old playlists, shared long stretches of silence that didn't need to be filled. When we pulled into our new neighborhood, the sun was starting to set. The house was modest, 1 story, narrow front porch, and a tiny garden in the back with uneven paving stones and overgrown mint. Eric stood in the backyard for a while, shoes still muddy from the drive, and just looked around. It didn't say a word, just smiled. We didn't have much unpacked. Just a mattress on the floor, a borrowed table from the neighbor, and a few boxes marked urgent. But it already felt more like home than anything we'd left behind. A week later, I started my new job. The office was calm. People introduced themselves, then got back to work. No awkward questions. No loaded small talk. Just clean, professional air. Eric started a few days after me. His new manager introduced him to the team as someone they were lucky to have. That evening, he brought home a branded coffee mug and a list of lunch spots from coworkers who actually seemed interested in getting to know him. That weekend, we invited 2 of Eric's cousins who lived nearby, plus a couple of neighbors we had already waved to during the move-in. It wasn't anything fancy: spaghetti, garlic bread, paper plates, and mismatched chairs. But the conversation flowed. No side glances, no awkward silences. No one tried to figure out if we belonged. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the lights dimmed, Eric sat back and said, "I didn't know I could just exist without shrinking." And I didn't answer. I just walked over, picked up the photo album his mother gave us, and placed it on the bookshelf next to our framed vow renewal photo. In the months that followed, we didn't hear from my parents. They didn't hear from us. No fights, no letters, no drawn-out goodbye, just a quiet ending to something that had already stopped growing.